This conversation brings a perspective we haven't had on the series before. A CISO operating inside a regulated European financial services entity, navigating DORA, the EU AI Act, and ISO 27001 in real time. I sat down with Gunnar Slott, CISO at Telia Finance in Sweden, who has deep experience across information security risk management, ISO 27001 certification, cyber insurance, and third-party supplier governance under some of the strictest regulatory frameworks in the world. In this conversation, Gunnar breaks down how DORA changes the game for AI in financial services.
And I would say that AI will impact almost every aspect of it.
Why AI chatbots can silently drift from customer support into regulated advisory territory without anyone noticing. Why he always asks, do we need AI to solve this problem?
I would like to flip the question, do we need AI to solve the problem, or could we just solve the problem in any other way?
Or can we just do it in Excel? And why treating AI as a subscription rather than an investment creates a concentration risk that nobody's talking about. If you operate in European financial services or any regulated industry, this one is essential. Thanks a lot, Gunnar, for joining the AI GovSec discussion series. Really appreciate you taking out time and doing this with me for the community. Would it be okay for you to introduce yourself? Because we have audience across the globe, so some of them are already familiar with you, some of them may not know you.
Oh, of course, Adi, and thank you for having me on the podcast. So my name is Gunnar Slott, and I'm currently the CISO of Telia Finance, credit institution in Sweden. I have a history within the finance industry, working with risks and the IT consultancy business as well. So I've been a bit all over the place when it comes to information security.
Perfect. Thank you, Gunnar. I would add that you have undersold yourself there because you have got decades and decades of solid information security and governance experience. So we will dive and we'll thread it out in this podcast. So let's get straight into it. So as you mentioned, you are a CISO at Telia Finance, which is like a regulated European financial services entity under one of the strictest regulatory frameworks in the world. And I know you have also worked upon information security at Soderbergh Partners and sort of led ISO 27001 and sort of various compliance certifications or standard certifications. If I may ask, what's the thread across all of this experience in your career with these organizations and the regulatory security build you have done? And the second part is, how does the AI impact, if anything, in that thread, and how are you seeing things differently?
So the thread, I would say, is curiosity and eagerness to learn new things. So that's always been sort of the reason for moving on and moving into a new area of either business or expertise. It's so much fun to just learn new stuff. And I would say that AI will impact almost every aspect of it, governing it, the information security, bits and pieces, third-party suppliers, management. So AI will definitely make things different moving forward.
I'm completely aligned with that topic and really helpful. Moving on, I think as we've just laid out, I think your career path has been really interesting and a little bit different than how most CISOs probably come up. You came probably from the project management and product media background before moving into the InfoSec. So how has this non-traditional information security, which is the traditional background, so how has that non-traditional background shaped your thought process whenever you look at compliance, standards, regulation, and more recently, the whole AI security and governance?
I mean, that's the only sort of thing that I know, so I can't really answer for anyone else, of course. But yeah, I think that I often benefit from being present in different kinds of the process. So I've been in the business process, I've been in this sort of management process, but I find it useful to be able to see the holistic picture of anything. What's the reason behind this regulation? How are we still going to make money when still complied to this regulation? What's the technical benefits and what's the sort of challenges as well in all these areas? So I think that my maybe a bit unconventional background helps me to see things a bit more holistic.
And just try to deconstruct it for the community. And if I understood you correctly, what you're trying to say is because you come from that non-traditional background, you can switch on sort of different hats, and maybe your thought process is more closer to the business and business executives because you can think and interpret things in their language and more from a dollar value profitability perspective.
I think I might have easier to adapt both in a communicational manner, but also, of course, understand what's important and what needs to be prioritized in their daily job.
Understood. And just, I know we are at the very start of this, but still, because we are at the question, what's one advice you would give to anybody who's trying to aspire to become CISO? Is this something like, okay, you should know the techie stuff as well, but I think you should also understand the business and all the, like, how business executives think?
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, start with the company that you're at, whether that's the company where you're aiming for a CISO role, but just try to adapt to what's driving our business in this company. Where do we earn the money? How much overhead do we need to be compliant in this? You need to have some sort of understanding of the regulation. So just read the regulation. That's a really good start. And of course, there are a lot of information on the internet that can help you get a soft start. But absolutely, you need the technical stuff. Absolutely. Dig into the regulatory parts and the business side of it as well. I think that's really mandatory if you want to be good at it.
Speaking of the regulatory stuff, moving into a little bit of your experience there, so DORA, which has just sort of come in lately, and which is the Digital Operational Resilience Act for everybody who doesn't know, which is now in effect across the EU states. As per understanding, you have direct experience of dealing with DORA and how to get compliant with it, how to deal with it. From your perspective, how does the DORA has changed how financial services organization were thinking security and processes before versus now, and then putting the whole AI risk layer on top of it, wherever the organizations in the FS space are trying to increase productivity by implementing AI, how they need to think with the DORA context?
Yeah. Let's see if I can find an answer to that one, but I'll give it a try. I mean, the DORA regulation, I think moving back one step, the reason for this regulation, I mean, DORA is operational resilience. So the reason for the regulation is to maintain the public trust in the monetary system. GDPR and AI Act is more to protect the individual freedom and rights for that individual. So just by understanding that there are different purposes of these regulations, that's a really good start. DORA, of course, focuses a lot on information security, where availability is a big part of it. But when it comes to the AI Act, I would say that you also need to have the accountability for the output of the system. We have all seen these hilarious hallucinations from different AI systems. And when you see them posted on social media, you can just laugh at them, of course, because they are so absurd. But when you actually add AI into some of your processes, then you still need to be accountable for the output. I mean, it's built to give you the most probable answer. It doesn't have any sort of concept of right or wrong. It's just based on this language model, what is the most probable answer to the question? And the way it expresses itself often is very persuasive. So one of the big challenges I see is that you need to be accountable for something that is really persuasive, but it's built to just answer the most probable answer to a question. How do you handle that in your daily operations? So that's really one of the challenges, I would say, that you need to take into account.
Got it. And just slightly going a little bit deeper here. So obviously, as you mentioned, DORA does require operational resilience, and that's where it comes into picture. From your experience, would like you to share your knowledge in terms of If you ever tested a scenario where like an AI system has been failing, whether it's the AI agent or the chatbot which you mentioned, or it is making, as you said, the most probable decision, but it's a wrong decision in terms of whether it's in the process which it is deployed by the customer service or in finance or procurement. What does that look like and how do you recover from that?
But I would say that any kind of process can, of course, generate some sort of error, whether it's an AI-based system or not. So you really need to cope with it like any system would deliver the wrong numbers or the wrong answer. But the trick is to discover it. And there are small things that could make really big difference. I mean, if you're taking the different level of risks in the AI Act and you have some sort of customer service chatbot, what if a customer asks that chatbot in a way that it starts to transform into giving advices? Then you all of a sudden are at a much higher level of risk, and there is a lot more regulations and controls tied to that level of risk. So I don't have a sort of more concrete example than that, but you really need to be aware and be confident that it doesn't deviate from what you were trying to accomplish with it, because then it could transform into something that the answer itself might not be harmful, or it might.
Mm.
But when you transform into a different risk level because of it, then you might have severe problems, I would say.
Got it. And this is really helpful example. I never thought from this perspective, but I could now see that how this will become important. And I could see the thought process behind the EU AI Act. And with this example, now I'm relating all the stories which I've seen on LinkedIn as customer chatbots. And you're absolutely right. At some point, it starts to turn into an advisor rather than a customer support, and that's huge risk. So
Yeah.
perfect.
And I mean, you can see all these examples where people post things to a chatbot and they just say, hey, hold on, I will just ask you this other question, which is totally unrelated to your company, but the chatbot still tries to answer the question. So it's a real problem, and it's here.
And that is still, as we are discussing, that even though it's unrelated question to the company's business, but the chatbot is answering, and that's still the company's accountable for the
At least it could be in some way. So I'm trying to, every time someone is asking, could we use AI to solve this problem? I would like to flip the question, do we need AI to solve the problem, or could we just solve the problem in any other way? Because then we have a lot of benefits. And I mean, if you would like to summarize a column in Excel, of course, you can ask any AI to summarize numbers, but you can also just summarize it in Excel and it will be cheap. Everyone knows how to do it, and it will give you the right answer every time. There are benefits to that as well.
Understood. Yeah. Moving on to the still in the DORA space, when we talk about all the AI LLM models, I think it does comes with its own baggage. Like you will have a frontier model as a service provider. Then you can deploy, for example, AI agents from third parties. So you will have a lot of vendors, AI vendors, and sort of LLM models and OpenAI, Anthropic. And looking at DORA and the other acts, it does come with its own strict regulations on the ICT, third party risk management, operational resilience side of things, and incident reporting as well, which is quite strict. How does this whole landscape changes from your perspective? How does the whole supply chain risk goes up with these regulations, with AI coming in and organizations implementing AI right, left, and center?
Yeah. And the third party risk, I would say, is one of the most hard ones to manage. As you say, you can implement it very sort of in the background somewhere. So as a customer in this example, then I'm not even aware of that there are some sort of AI in the background. And I think the only solution here is that you, when you're sort of signing with a new supplier, you really need to make some sort of commitment in the agreement that they need to tell you if they change anything. you need to have the opportunity to say no if it doesn't fit your organizational needs, and that they can cope with the risk. And if you're not comfortable with that supplier, that they will actually let you know this, then I think you should choose another supplier. So, because it's going to be really, really hard if they intentionally or unintentionally, just by not knowing, implement something in the back. I mean, both from an information security perspective, do we have confidentiality in this system, or did we just break it? And from an accountability perspective, can I be accountable for any kind of output that my supplier system feeds me if there is an AI in it? Maybe, maybe not, but for sure I want to know about it so I can manage it.
At least it's not gray, it's either black or white, because we have added the light on and we have the clarity. And it's, as you said, it's a very difficult risk to manage, because I'm discussing on the podcast with a lot of CISOs with different levels of organization, sort of like volume. And I have seen people indicating that our finance team or our local entity finance team, procurement team have implemented this small AI on their local systems. We never knew from past 2 years that this AI was operating across all ERPs. And now we have this. So it's one of the biggest risks.
And the hardest one to discover as well. As you say, it can just fly below the radar.
Correct.
For a long period of time.
And as we are talking about the compliances, obviously DORA is already there, NIS2 is also already there. EU AI Act there's a lot of bits happening in that area, and it will soon be there. For a financial services organization, how would you advise somebody to leverage the existing control framework or risk framework which they have implemented, let's say for NIS2 and DORAs and GDPR, for aligning with the EU AI Act? And if any examples, high level, generic examples you can share, that this is the best value they can, without sort of wasting too much of efforts from the team, they can generate the value and be compliant.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, start with the very basic. You need some sort of register with what kind of tools you're having within your organization, the products and services. And you need to risk assess them to understand where on this scale you actually have that AI system. And I would say that if you're in a situation where you're about to start and you don't know where to poke around, then just make sure that you stay on the lower levels. Of course, you can always use it for gather competitor information. And here we come back to what is the purpose of the AI Act. It is to protect the individual freedom and rights. So if you gather information about competitors, that is companies, that is not individuals, that's fairly straightforward, I would say.
Right.
So if you have that kind of approach, let's start with the basic. You have the minimum non-risk level, and then you have the second level, which requires transparency. If you have a chatbot or something, just start by knowing what you have. Make sure that you have some sort of risk assessment process attached to it, and make sure that you stay on the lower levels. And then you need to find the bits and pieces that you actually need to find, but then it wouldn't be too much administrative burden on it.
Understood. And I guess that's a great summary in there. And what I'm taking back is, do the assessment of whether that system is more high risk and sort of medium or low risk in terms of the AI system. And I think your suggestion is, if it is processing personal data, people's data, it is somehow interacting with people's data, then it could lie in that high risk.
And then, of course, you automatically get much more higher requirements on confidentiality and integrity, at least from the regulations perspective. So that's why you should always question, do we need AI to solve this problem, or is there another way? Could we just summarize it in Excel instead?
Yeah, I could see the business case should be probably, do we need AI to solve this problem, or by implementing AI, we'll get more problems to solve?
Sometimes, of course, I mean, AI is, of course, a supercharger, but you need to be very precise where you direct it, because if you supercharge something that's bad and that will give you administrative burden, then you will also supercharge that as well. And that's why I sort of say that start with the low risk, the more easy stuff to handle, because you hopefully get some benefits and then you learn how to aim this supercharger.
This is really helpful. Moving on to the section 3, which is regarding the ISO 27001 ISMS experience, because I know you have managed the full ISO 27001 certification process at your previous organizations and then run the full sort of ISMS. When organizations are introducing AI into the picture, or there are a lot of startups popping up which are like AI based software development or AI based SaaS solutions. So when AI is introduced into an ISO 27001 certified environment, AI tools used internally, AI used in the products, AI agents, what needs to change in the implemented ISMS or from an ISMS perspective?
Yeah, I would say that at least you need the register and you need some sort of process for classify what risk level you're putting yourself into. And as boring as it is, that's the basic. There is no option. You need to have that one in place. And then there are different, a number of controls. How do we use this? Do we have AI literacy? We need to educate the staff that should actually work with this as well. And of course, when it comes to confidentiality, integrity, and availability, you need to look at it from this perspective as well. And the confidentiality, since AI can bring in any kind of information that is in scope that it has access to, and the integrity, maybe the source data is correct, but in some way AI transforms it when it gives you the answer. It's really persuasive, I would say, in trying to convince you that it is a proper answer when it might not be.
Ideally, along with what you said, if I understood correctly, so do the basic hygiene, do the do all of that from that organization risk perspective. But specifically for the AI products or use cases, do sort of input output controls as well. You do understand that if that's the input it is using, the output is aligned and the output makes sense versus it's not like persuading you to do something else.
Yeah.
Okay. This makes sense. And then on the back of it, because there is this new certification also there, a lot of organizations are working to it, is the ISO 42001, which is the emerging AI specific management system standard. From your experience, if the organizations are already running ISMS, should organization pursue separately 42001 as well, or just integrate the AI governance into 27001? And this is just your preference and thought behind it.
I would go to complement the one I already have. Since you have a substantial overlap and DORA is actually taking presence and most of us are using ISO 27001 to at least fulfill parts of DORA. So I would go try to complement the existing one. And I think if you make separate processes of it, then you also risk that you interpret things slightly different. You have different preferences and things like that. And you have the principle of which you also need to interpret in the same way. So if you're a small company with not too complex business, then the burden are less heavy.
Got it. And from your experience, what you're seeing in the EU right now, the customers of European financial services could be other enterprises and businesses. Are they already starting to ask organizations, vendors in the financial services space for ISO 42001? Or they're still happy if you show them 27001 plus aligned with GDPRs and NIS2 and all of that?
From my experience, I haven't seen too much focus on the 42001 standard, but I guess it's a matter of time.
So I'll ask and you can share whatever you can, because which it was just getting me curious about, and I completely agree that whenever you get a problem, you do think whether AI is the right solution to solve that problem, or is there any way else we can solve it? How would you advise to CISOs, to your peers who are sitting against businesses, boards, audit and risk committees? where the leadership of business is asking them why you are stopping us, why you are not letting us to do all of this magic, and we will be magical from day one onwards once all the solution has been implemented. How do you interact with them, showing them that with AI, all of this risk and Pandora's box gets opened from your
Yeah.
experience?
I would start with this example with the hallucinations. I mean, if you as a C-level manager want to implement AI in your critical process, and you're sort of hoping to get much more earnings or efficiency or something, of course you're hoping to earn more money. Are you still prepared to be accountable for some system that could actually suggest that you could walk over water, so to speak? And I think it's really easy to understand when you take these different hallucination examples as what they need to accept accountability for. And then you can sort of help them to understand, where should we use AI? Where is it less risk, more safe? And where should we not use AI? Because it's really, really hard to implement a predictable return of investment. For sure, this customer service chatbot didn't have a budget for answering someone who is asking about PHP script. Help.
Completely aligned. So I really sit across the business executives and sort of like show them the risks which are coming already on there, few examples, and then try to show from an ROI business case perspective that
Yep.
yes, it can be done, but this is the risk view of that risk, and this is what we can get into.
Yep.
So try to sort of understand many use cases or different use cases where the ROI is much better, less risky versus the other areas.
Yeah. Or try to help them to understand the cost of verifying the information coming from an AI system to be able to accept accountability for the output. So moving a bit back to the risk part of this discussion, I would say that you in your organization have a super expert on something really advanced technical. They are driven by solving problems and their technique. And then someone finds out that, okay, we can replace that person's output with an AI. We can just ask the AI, how should we make an architectural strategy for our company, technical architectural company. And since you cannot just take the output and accept accountability for it, then you most likely take that expert that previously did this strategy, and then you say, can you please verify that AI is giving us the correct answer? And that expert as a person will not be driven by sort of taking accountability for someone else's work when he or she didn't have the authority to actually do this strategy. So you're sort of moving people out of their expertise, and the risk is that you're trying to force them into be accountable for the AI work instead of just doing the work themselves. And I don't think they will work at that company for a very long time. So you add also a risk and a cost of hiring people.
This is really, really helpful. Perfect. Moving on to section 5, the third party AI risk in regulatory finance. I know we have touched upon slightly third party, but it's a topic in itself. So we'll try to go level deeper. You have deep experience, I think, in third party supplier management under the ESA regulations. When a financial service organization vendor embeds AI in their product, I think we have touched upon this already, sometimes without explicit notification. So although the contract will say that they must notify you, but sometimes because of features, because of the account manager have a relationship with business, so they did something for them specifically. How, based on your experience, your expertise, how do you discover that, assess it, govern it, from a regulatory perspective and from an organizational risk management perspective?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic and a hard one. I mean, it would be impossible to detect if they don't tell you what they are doing. So choosing your suppliers, your vendors, your partners, and be really, really confident that they have the interest in letting you know and letting you in on the decision whether to use AI or not in their product or the service. That's the only way that you can be somewhat sure that you actually detect that there are AI involved in the supplier's system or service. And I think there will be a new generation of agreements with quite different amendments as well, that we require them to not only tell us if they have certain types of incidents, they also need to tell us way in advance. Are we planning to move into integrating AI in our product or services? And if we do, and you do not agree, I need to have the sort of time frame available to make use of my exit strategy, or to be able to turn it off in the product or service. So, okay, great invention, but it's not for us. So we need to turn it off.
Hmm.
And I mean, you need to understand the deep technical details. How is the environments? Are they separated per customer? Is it even theoretically possible to turn off AI or not? And how does the vendor make sure that they are accountable for the output?
And I think this last point is the most crucial. It hit me. Ideally, yeah, how do you make the vendor accountable
Yeah.
for?
I mean, if we have some sort of SLA requirement on a system, then we have a subcontractor who is operating that system. We put the same SLA requirements in our agreement to that subcontractor. And you need to sort of mimic that here as well. If they are implementing AI, they need to have the same accountability as we need to have the accountability to our customers.
And just slightly, probably I'll put DORA into the picture as well here. DORA introduces specific requirements on concentration risk for ICT providers, vendors. Now, I think we touched upon slightly before, with most AI running on a handful of foundational models by OpenAI, Anthropics, Google's. Does this create a DORA concentration risk as well, which nobody sort of is touching upon?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had the Anthropic Fable 5 that recently was made available and then redrawn just a week later or something. So if anyone was quick enough to actually adapt some sort of business requirement that was reliant on Fable 5, then they didn't have that process anymore. As you say, there are a handful of really big players that supply all these. They are regulated from the US most, but you also have the financial risk. Both OpenAI and Anthropic have astronomical values to their companies. And at some point, the investors needs to see some sort of return on investment. What happens then with the company, with the product? Will it be available, or will it be transformed into something else and not available to the general public? Or will the terms and conditions differ? Will the price increase? I mean, every company has a need to have a sort of predictable spend going forward. You need to have a budget, and you need to make sure that you follow that budget. And any kind of investment, if you buy a house, you know that, okay, this house is supposed to support us for 50 years, and you can calculate any kind of investment from that. But I read somewhere that someone described this as a subscription rather than an investment. And then you need to treat it like that, because there's a huge difference to have an investment, that you have bought something that holds a value over time. This can either be just redrawn from you and not available to the next day, but you're still have invested in a lot of things around it. So it's like having a building, but then they just take the electricity away.
Co-workers. I think this is another very critical point, which I haven't seen much people talked about. I think what you mentioned was really critical because, yeah, it's the capex versus opex piece, isn't it? Even from an accounting perspective,
Yeah.
that you will build the whole capex piece
Yeah.
around it, but it is still treated as your opex.
Yeah. So keeping your budget and controlling process in place will be crucial, but it will also be super hard. I mean, you hear these stories where you sort of measure performance at the developer by measuring how many tokens they spend. I think that's just crazy. It's really, really easy to spend tokens. That's not a problem.
Correct.
And I don't think too many do measure that as a measure of success either. But financial accounting budgets versus needing to treat this as a subscription, but you cannot be super sure on what kind of value it will bring back to you.
And this needs to be like, there has to be a thought process around it from.
And of course, that's the reason why we're talking about having on-premises AI rather than relying on these big, expensive models that in theory could all answer any kind of questions. In many cases, it would be more reasonable to have a very specialized AI that is on-premise, cheap, and predictable, because you have 100% control of the underlying language model. And then it would be easier to manage it like an investment rather than a subscription.
And going back to one of the points, from a DORA perspective, then, would it be right to designate these OpenAIs and Anthropic as your critical ICT providers for the companies who are using their product?
I would say that it depends on the process that you're using them in. You need to classify, is this a critical part of our business? Ordering post-it notes, maybe not critical. Having a credit decision if you're a company like ours, yes, of course, that's a critical part. So it all depends on where you're actually using it. So from that perspective, having an assisted agent that will help a developer to create good quality code that lives up to our different frameworks for information security, but the output is still plain code, and hopefully it will be a secure and reliable and scalable application. But it was an AI assisted human who were creating it rather than letting the AI do the credit assessment. And then you're sort of managing this problem that you're taking people out of their expertise and having them as some sort of goalkeeper for being accountable for AI mistakes, and where they are supercharge them with AI, but be careful who's accountable for the AI output.
Yeah, I think this is a topic where we could spend hours and hours discussing, and it's great. But I'm glad I'm doing this with you and you're sharing, because I don't think so many people in EU is talking about from this perspective. So it's really helpful. One more bit. So let's say if an organization is using it for critical use cases, yeah, and the model becomes, let's say, OpenAI's model or Anthropic's model, and let's say they had an incident in the last few sort of months. We do know that there are a lot of incidents happened with, let's say, Gemini and OpenAI's. From a DORA perspective, then, because the incident management requirement is quite high, isn't it, from a DORA?
Yep.
How would you advise somebody who is having that dependency on these for critical use cases and they had the incident? So how do you sort of manage, but then manage the cons, leave the noise out, and how do you inform the regulators?
Yeah, I mean, from an incident management perspective, for sure you need to be 100% certain that the supplier, in this case, a big AI provider on a global basis, that you have access to their incident logs or incident announcements, or what you should call them. But since if you're a small player or medium-sized player or even a national player, I don't think that OpenAI will call you and tell you that something happened. You will most likely be informed by some sort of notification system where they put everything. So you need to make sure that you have the resources to filter this. Is this one applicable to us or not? And if it is, what kind of SLA requirements do we have on this system? Is it a 24/7 system, or is it plain office hours or something else? And then you need to really make sure that you have the resources on call to assess this. And once you have assessed it, then I think it's the normal incident management process that should kick in. This shouldn't be different in any way. You assess the incident, see if there is anything you need if anyone you need to wake up in the middle of the night in your organization. And of course, you need to start to prepare if you need to report this to the SFSA.
Really, really helpful. So I think based on your profile experience and just talking with you for 40 minutes, I think you are operating in one of the most complex regulatory environments, right? There you've got DORA, EU AI Act, ISOs, financial services regulations, customers. If somebody's sitting in a similar position, similar environment as yourself, looking ahead for 12 to 24 months, what would be your 3 things you will advise them to do?
I would say look at your DORA implementation project and see if there were anything that were really successful or less successful, and just learn by previous projects. If you're moving into an AI Act adaptation compliance project or something like that, just make any kind of learnings from what you have already done. That's the first thing. The second thing, it's a bit boring to say, but back to basic, make sure you have an AI register. Make sure you have made a risk assessment to understand what level are your system positioned at. Make sure that you have a change management process, because in more traditional IT projects, it's less of a risk that you have some sort of scope creep that moves the system to a higher level of risk. But with the example with the customer chatbot, it could be a UX designer or a copywriter or something who makes a small decision on how this chatbot should look, feel, how it should express itself. That actually makes all the difference. And moving it from a chatbot in customer support into some sort of advisory function. So change management, but on all levels. So this AI literacy, you need to educate your organization on different levels, but all of them needs to be educated that small decisions that they do on a daily basis within their own daily tasks could make a huge difference. And people don't have to be expert on AI Act, but they need to know enough to know that now I'm on thin ice. I need to ask someone. I need to make sure that I do the right thing here and doesn't jeopardize things.
Really helpful. We have this tradition on the podcast that the previous guest leaves the question for the next guest without knowing who will be. So I'm going to ask you the question left by the previous guest in the AI governance and security domain. You can skip it or you can share your view. And then I will give you the opportunity to leave the question for the next guest. It could be anything in this space. So the question, which was a CISO from a German automotive industry OEM maker, how do you manage the topics around data leakage when it comes to the LLMs, AI agents, chatbots? Is it something which scares you? Or is it something which you are managing it under control, so you feel confident about from a wider industry perspective? So how do you see data leakage in terms of AI?
Yeah, for sure, it scares me. Or I can see it as a high risk. Of course, confidentiality is super important, for sure in the finance industry and for sure in the automobile industry as well. And we were discussing a bit about third-party management earlier as well. How can you be sure that they are not implementing AI without you knowing it? And this is basically the same question. How, even if they state in the agreement that they have this corporate account subscription, we are not using any of your input into training the data model or anything like that, but you can never be sure. So if I'm handling data with high confidentiality requirements, I would strongly suggest that you go for some sort of on-premise solution or a very, very small targeted solution with a particularly selected supplier.
And now it's your opportunity to leave a question for the next guest.
Oh, that's a hard one. Well, ACT require us to actually sort of measure the, measure the accuracy of an AI model. How do you do that?
Very interesting question.
That's $1 million question, I would say. I hope they won't hate me for it.
They won't for sure. But it's a good question to start the thought process, at least in the area. So really, really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Gunnar, for taking out time and doing this with me.
Thank you for having me.